Hey everyone, welcome to my SQL Bit session. More like a story actually, but we'll get into that. My name is André, I'm from the Netherlands. I am a data platform MVP since 2009. I am paid to be a computer geek since 1989, so hence the gray hair and the reading glasses. I've been working with SQL Server since about 7.0. I've seen some 6.5, but not really. These days I like to move data to Azure. Been lucky enough to skip ADF v1. Don't envy the people who were there from the beginning. I love Powershell, and I'm a Python student, basically. I live in the center of Amsterdam, recording this on a Monday night when it's dark outside, so no noise, because tourists park their bicycles right out here. The tour starts during the day. That's it, let's get into it. Oh, in case you're wondering, this is coffee, even though it's late. I shouldn't, but And I hope you enjoyed this. So, my story, where do I begin? I work for a company. I can't really say what I do there. It's a big bank in the Netherlands and we handle a lot of sensitive data. When I say a lot, we'll get to it, but it's a lot. And we work with something called a Cloud Competence Center when we wanted to move our data into the cloud. That was really good because companies have big learning curves sometimes. So did this one, especially if you want to move all your stuff that you've been building in ivory towers in the 2 data centers that you own into the cloud. You learn quite a thing, and it's good to have some help. And this is about me as part of a team that moved a lot of data to the cloud and had to adhere to all the policies that kept changing a bit because the ivory towers we're not there, because this is new. I hope you maybe learn from this a bit or recognize some stuff in advance so it can be helpful for you. If all goes well, I should be live right now, somewhere, here, I don't know. Supposed to be a Q&A thing for SQL Bit. So ask away, let me know if this is helpful or not. Here we go. I've called this thing Acme Incorporated, right? A company that makes everything, because I can't use the name of the bank. I have to make sure I stay within the green screen thingies. If my hand disappears, it should disappear now, right? I still getting used to all this stuff, like all of the other speakers, and with a few exceptions, I'm sure. So I work for a company, quite a large company, billions in revenue, and this is the current process. This is what I was used to. So there is, first of all, we have the business. They're actually called that. They're called the business. Maybe there's an official title that we haven't heard yet, but everybody says it's the business. It's the people that are not the IT. It's the people that make the products. It's the people that do the work that makes this company grow. Year after year. But to do that, they need help from IT. And there's a couple of ITs in this company. There is there are many departments in the business. So there are also many departments in business IT that support the business. So we're the IT people that build stuff or maintain stuff for the business. But we don't really maintain the infrastructure. We don't buy or maintain the data centers. We don't make backups of the databases, if you will. If you're a SQL guy, I'm a SQL guy. I'm gonna use a lot of SQL references here. So for us to use infrastructure, we also have something called infrastructure IT, or the infra guy. This is the people that we talk to if we want a SQL server, or some servers, or a mainframe, or a call center, or whatever, or have a backup restored, whatever, all these things that make infrastructure, all the disaster recovery stuff. And as the business IT, we work more closely with the business themselves, with the business unit we work for. You've guessed it maybe already, but I'm here. I work for this business IT department. I have to help the business create systems or maintain systems or even maintain data. I'm a data engineer, basically. I used to be a DBA on the infrastructure IT side, so I know them quite well. I know the processes quite well, but I don't have SA rights to my database because it's maintained by them. And I don't create the backups, they do that. Anyway, if we want something done by the infrastructure guys, this is a 20-30-year-old process. We talk to them and they have a process. Sometimes this is even online. There's something called an infra shop. We can go online inside the company on the internet. We can go online on the internet and click on some things, and then there's an approval process, and then boom, we've got a database. And if the process is not clear, we talk to them and then they explain the process to us. So very simple, you talk to infra IT and they explain the process to you and you follow the process and you get what you need. So here was my question. Dear DBAs, I've got a table. I've got more tables, but one of them has 60 billion rows. And we figured out we need an index on this thing. We have a few, not too many on 60 billion rows. You don't want that. But we want another one. Besides 4 days of downtime to create this thing, everything happens in... If you ever wonder how to handle this is a 150 terabyte database, a SQL server. If you ever wonder how to maintain these things, in slow motion. You do everything pre-planned and pre-practiced. So can I please have a 20 terabyte extra disk space? Because I need to create an index. We've already arranged the four days of downtime we need to actually build this thing. Because online index rebuild on a thing like this, yeah, no, our temp DB is not that big. The DBA team, maybe your DBA team as well, I see this a lot in different companies. They work with standardized SQL servers. They have, I think these guys have 1,700 of them, and they've just divided them up into parts to make life a bit easier for them. They have T-shirt sizes. You just specify what you want. Do you want an S, a small database? Do you maybe want an M? Or you've guessed it, maybe an L, and you think we'd get more into what I want, an X, but no, too small. And even an XL is not for me. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, maybe it does. I've seen this in multiple companies. What comes after XL? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it while I have a sip from this awesome coffee. What comes after XL? Special. Yeah, I run a data warehouse, not an OLTP system, and these t-shirt sizes seem to be made for OLTP systems. But if you run a data warehouse, every data warehouse ever is a special. It drives me nuts. They just don't seem to be built for, they just don't seem to cater for these things. As soon as you're talking multiple terabytes, we want, or even multiple terabytes of memory, they just go, no, special. Mind you, this is all side discussion. If you ever think, oh, we have a special, we need raw iron, there's no way you can virtualize a 100 terabyte SQL server. Yes, you can. This is what is it? 8 core VMware, nicely tuned. 8 core VMware. I get there's a nice expensive SAN underneath. I get latency on the storage is 1-2 milliseconds. Not that bad for a data warehouse. I'm happy. So this is totally possible. So even though it's a special, they can handle it. But I keep asking and asking and asking. I want terabytes here, terabytes there, terabytes here, terabytes there. So while talking to the infra IT guy, for this stuff, when I started on this 150 terabyte data warehouse, I just thought they're just gonna throw process after process after process after process at me. Just, you need to follow more process than normal. But since I've worked there, I thought, I can do that. I know these guys, I know the process, I know why some things are a process, I know what makes a specialist special and why, because they have to talk to the SAN people, because by default everything is redundant, and by default everything is backed up to tape, which doesn't really work well if you have 150 terabytes. So we had to back up to 4 tape streamers at the same time and switch off the cache. And we can only do that by making the block size a certain size, so it didn't go to disk as an intermediate step, and we figured it out. We actually make a backup once a week of this thing. It's good. We're happy with this. It's an ETL system, so it's a data warehouse. So if we have to redo the work of a week, it's going to be painful, but we can do it. Right? It's not OLTP. We can just read in all the sources. So, and also we would expect a little bit of extra meetings with some people from maybe other departments, because the DBAs would say, okay, we can do things with the SAN or something, but then we'd also have to talk to the SAN manager and that kind of stuff. So this is nothing strange, but at some point they went, you again, how many terabytes is it now? Only 60, 60, 60, okay. You know what, you were here last week as well for something like that. You know what, we're gonna send somebody over to talk to you, right? Maybe we need to talk some sense into you, because it's just not gonna work. This is too much. So what is too much? What happened for us? This is clearly we've reached the limit of the future growth. We could still grow here. We have some space, but management had said, you know what? We are okay with going to the cloud, Azure in our case, and this is going to probably take a while because we're not really used to the cloud. There are some few other departments that are already in the clouds. We have some structure, but still, what are you going to do? So we looked at our system and went, well, our database right now is about 150 terabytes, but there's not a lot of tables, and some of the tables have billions of rows, or even as the one before, 60 billion, and we expect it to grow quite fast. There were a few, we thought we had this under control. We thought, okay, 150 terabytes, billions and billions and billions of rows, but we're doing this on-prem already. We know what to do, right? We're thinking, we can do this. Then a manager comes along and goes, André, you know what? We've got a lot of data that is coming up that we need you to process as well. And I put my diva hat on. I go, what do you think? What do you call a lot of data? I'm not easily impressed. And he went, well, we've got Kafka streams coming in, and one of them will be 15 terabytes a month, give or take a terabyte, but that's what we're looking at. So I'm taking my diva hat off and thinking, yeah, I call this a lot of data as well. Let's see. It's a good thing we're going to the cloud. The local IT people probably would want to talk some more sense into me there. So we thought, okay, what do we do? Where do we start? This is the cool part of the cloud, right? You don't have to have a full-blown upfront plan. You can just start with what you know, maybe, and then do some testing and maybe switch. And this is quite agile what you can do. So we were thinking, okay, with this thing that we already know, the 150 terabyte with a few tables, Synapse, the old Azure Data Warehouse now renamed to Synapse Analytics. Sounds good. I know the distributed model, I know how this thing works, I've played with it before, even with the old APS on-prem, so why not? It's a thing that I know. And the Kafka streams, it had some weird things that the data itself, this was a trigger for me, the data itself didn't really lend itself for column store indexes, which is kind of a thing when you're going to Synapse. It works better if you have column store, if you're index column store, well, is that English? So we were thinking, oh, maybe we could try Databricks there. That might be a thing, right? We'll see. This is the cool part of the cloud. So smaller companies, maybe at home for sure. You go to the person who owns the credit card and owns the budget or makes the decisions, get approval, and they take out the credit card and they pay for a license there for your subscription to Azure, and you go ahead. For us, this is obviously not the case. So this is basically where this story starts. What I've got 3 phases that the team went through because the Cloud Competence Center went through it as well. They did all the networking and the teaching and the learnings and the corporate things, and we just were data people and we went, okay, a lot of it is new, but we understand this Synapse, let's do this together. I've never written an ARM template though, or maybe a few. So let's see. So there were 3 phases, and out of that came sort of kind of at the end of, well, I guess a year and a half, maybe even 2, 10 lessons learned. So this is what I have for you. This is what we're going through. Like I said before, I should be on the Q&A somewhere in this SQL Bits thing if you're watching it live. If you're not and you're watching a recording, my contact details will be somewhere, I think, at the beginning or at the end of the video, or else I'll edit them in later. I don't know how that works. We'll see. So also, I have a bonus phase as well. This is what I've seen, not with the company I work for. There's a few other companies where I've seen this actually, and I thought it was pretty dangerous. And I thought it's probably better if I talk a little bit on how that works. So if you recognize this might be a warning signal to you. I hope you're watching this with coffee as well, or your beverage of choice. It's a Saturday. No, it's a Friday. This should be a Friday. So here we go, phase 0. Like I said, phase 0 did not happen where I work. So this is sort of kind of in the pictures will look the same, and I'm using the same descriptions of the departments in the company and whatnot, but this didn't happen with this. I just recognize it from other companies, and it's not it's a warning signal. If you recognize this, be careful. I'm not saying it's bad and you should never do this. There might be a good reason for it, but for us it was a warning signal, and we thought, okay, you're not really using the cloud. So your business IT, right? This is us. We've established it. There's the company above there, and there's a big fat line underneath. And there's infrastructure IT. And this is the crux of the story. Infrastructure IT sometimes runs with this story and applies all their ivory tower process to this thing. So they go, you know what, we're just gonna make a box inside Azure and treat it like a third data center. So we're gonna, it's called a VNet, all these networking things. We're gonna VNet everything, put firewalls around it, and we're just gonna make it as an extension of the company. We're gonna take Active Directory and link it to the company, and the AD of the company will be the AD inside Azure. It will just all be the same. We'll just have everything everywhere. So this is basically the infrastructure guys deciding everything. There is no input from others. They take their old school stuff. They take this blanket approach to everything, and without, and this is important, without looking at outside information on how you should approach this, because there's a lot of good documentation on how you should approach this. Microsoft itself is full of this. Maybe I should edit something in here, a way you can find that. Should be here now. Because they decide everything, it's very easy for them to also control everything, right? So you typically get just one subscription that has everything in it that the infrastructure IT manages. It's just based around one big VNet or maybe some management stuff, but you don't see this. And the thing is that what you get basically as a natural evolution of this model is a lot of VMs. It's just a lot of VMs. That the other options don't really work because they don't sit inside a VNet. They live outside. I've even seen it where the web connection, the internet connection, is on the outside of the company through another provider and doesn't even go through the Azure provider, which probably has a fast internet connection, but they don't have it that way. So this thing is very IaaS heavy. I'm not going to show this pizza thing. We've seen this in multiple presentations, right? I'm not going to go there. But this is where you're not really using the services that Microsoft provides, like Azure Data Warehouse or Databricks or Azure SQL DB. I just want a single DB and you manage everything else. Nope. This is all VMs, and you still have to patch and maintain everything yourself and take care of the security and whatnot. So these SaaS and PaaS solutions are not very welcome in this model because the model is not very good for it, and also the infrastructure IT guys maybe fear it. These are not our infrastructure IT guys. So no, these guys know what they're doing, and this is not them. If you see this might end quickly. They'll find out really quickly that this is not the way to go, and they'll do it differently once they get some outside advice. But I just wanted to talk about that to warn you. Now, they'll also do is map the existing processes that they already had to this thing. So for you as a business IT, nothing changes. All you get is a lot of extra processes that you weren't used to before. There is no innovation at all. There's no flexibility, why are you going to the cloud? Please don't say it's cheaper, because it's usually not. It's more flexible, and you can move faster, you can innovate faster, and you can use different solutions for the right fit and whatnot. But actually cheaper, yeah, because you're more flexible and such. But pure price-wise, if you would do exactly the same, so build a lot of VMs that you already have on-prem, that's probably not cheaper. So this is often driven by fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I hope that changes quickly in this case if you see it, because you'll be going through all these processes, and this is no fun. You're not really going to the cloud. It's probably, you're going to probably get more people talking to you and asking you to not do a certain thing. If you go, can I have 60 terabytes? And they're like, no, it's difficult, right? Because all their automation processes are not that mature yet for this side of things, and they are on-prem. So you're not really winning anything there. Certainly not as a customer of that department. So let's go to the real thing. The phases that I've seen, there are this corporate identity go through with the help of this department that prepares everything for you. They had a learning curve, and I've been to a meetup of a bunch of these a Cloud Center of Excellences, these CCCs or CCOEs. And I've heard other companies talk about their learning curves, and they were sort of kind of the same. Some of them did it the other way around, some of them disagree with what we do here. But the final phase 3 or phase 4 is like the reverse, or it's like this. But they're similar, so you might recognize it. And hopefully, because you recognize it, this might be useful, right? So here we go. Phase 1 is where the CCC says, you know what? We're going to have a shared basically a network, sort of kind of the phase 0, but not that rigid. So we're going to give everybody who needs one a resource group, and inside the resource group, you as a team can use Azure DevOps to deploy infrastructure. So you can do that yourself as a team. You don't have to have anybody else do it. There's no request model or no old school stuff that you have to fill out a form or have meetings. No, you build your own deployment model. So far so good. This is nice, right? Some drawbacks here though. There's a few things that they do to make sure that you don't go crazy with the data that you have. If you put data there, and it wouldn't be safe, because now they let you do things yourself, right? So there's a few things they do. First of all, they have something called management groups. So from a subscription basically above yours, they can push policies. They can say, you know what, no public IP addresses. I actually wanted to do that. I created a VM, and I didn't really want to do that, but I created a VM as a jump box, and accidentally I gave it a public IP address, or so I thought. It crashed. It didn't crash, but it gave me an error message. It just went, nope, sorry, not allowed, policies. So I thought, okay, that's good. And they can do other things like maximum size of VMs, or what services you can and cannot do. There might be security that says, okay, this service, not allowed yet. We haven't seen the documentation from Microsoft around how they do the security with this thing, or we haven't approved it, so this service is not allowed yet. So you can do Azure SQL DB, but not Databricks or something, right? Things like that. So these policies come from above. Now, also regions, right? For us, Europe is fine. So we'll be using West Europe for our normal data and North Europe for our failovers. This is forced. We can't go East US or something. That wouldn't work. Now, there's a few other things. One of the funniest ones that I saw was where I first thought, oh, that's cool. And then we worked with it for a while and thought, this is actually quite complicated. This takes a long time. But there you go. You get two resource groups, a dev one and a production one. And the dev one, and I've borrowed this term from the Power BI world, where they're so proud of clicky, clicky, draggy, droppy. This is a term that they use to easily play with billions and billions of rows of data in an easy way. In the rest of the IT world, we don't like clicky, clicky, draggy, droppy. We want to automate all the things, right? We like our PowerShell and not our ever built a couple hundred SSIS packages by hand. Don't do that. So at first we thought, okay, this is cool. And this was quite strict. There were no exceptions possible. If you did not automate your code, if you didn't have a DevOps pipeline with your infrastructure as code in it, you couldn't get it into production. There was no way. You had to do it this way. That sounded cool at the beginning. It really did. We thought, yes, I'm a PowerShell fan. I would love to learn all this DevOps stuff. We've been playing with it. So this infra as code, maybe ARM templates. We were so excited. It's not that easy though. It's not that easy. So what you get when you want to deploy something to Azure, you load your code, you run your code through an agent. This company had their own VMs with their own agents, doesn't really matter. Microsoft has also agents for you. You can choose between Windows and Linux and some other stuff. But basically, you also have to say what scope you want to use to deploy, because normally this is standard. You will deploy something inside a management group. So you have a management group, a resource group. Resource management group all the way at the top. Resource group. You have a resource group, and you deploy stuff in there, like your SQL database and your SQL Server and your storage, and you deploy it in a resource group. But how do you make the resource group, right? And there's other things like an AD user. How do you do that? So there you have to run at subscription level. But then how do you not throw away somebody else's resource group? All right? How does that work? If you're all in a shared subscription and you're all different departments that all don't talk to each other, because this IT department has thousands of people. So they went with a marketplace kind of thing. They made their own tasks, custom tasks, that you were supposed to use. So they made these Acme tasks basically for the CCC people did that. And they had a task for add a resource group, right? So you could create your own resource group, and it was pretty cool because you had your own departmental shortcut, the acronym, right? And when you deployed one, it would automatically add your acronym of your department to the resource group and a number at the end. And there was some stuff that just needed to be there because business people, business IT or IT people like everything clean and neat, and naming conventions. Let's not have a discussion about that. They just handled that for us. So pretty cool. Also, one thing that they needed to handle was adding and removing managed identities and AD users and whatnot, or adding users to groups and adding groups. All this AD stuff. You have a shared directory, so you can't just give people the keys to the thing and you just go ahead, build yourself a pipeline that will add or delete a user, because I could delete the whole thing. That's not cool. What they did though, by the way, is the corporate IT was not synced to the Azure AD. It was, but they made special groups and special naming conventions, and only those new users were synced to AD. So even though they were available on both sides, they were special for Azure. The normal AD users that you would use on-prem did never ever get access to Azure. It wasn't like this was like 60,000 users or something. They didn't sync that to Azure. Nobody was there. So, all good. This is understandable, but this was a difficult one. They went, you know what? We're not going to let you create your own ARM templates to deploy stuff, because we have rules. We have, for instance, if you want to deploy a SQL server, you need a SQL database, but your firewall needs to be a certain setting. It needs to be attached to the standard VNet that we have. You need to have a key vault with it, and your DB8 team needs to be a member of the thing. There's all these standards that we want you to adhere to. And we have created a task in the marketplace, a private marketplace for us as well, that would do exactly that. If you just use that, you will get an approved SQL server. Okay, so far so good. So we went, okay, then we'll just use that. It makes it easy for us, right? And there was quite a lot of stuff. We would have an Azure data warehouse with key vaults and managed identities and a data data storage and a storage for the metrics, but also, for instance, storage where auditing would go, because the auditing department was different, and we were audited as well as users. There was sensitive data. We are not allowed to just run queries or look for our own name because we might be in there as well. So we had to write our auditing data to storage that we were not allowed to get to. The auditing department would do this. Anyway, so far so good. It made sense to use these components. Unfortunately, there were some disadvantages. These components take a lot of time to create and test. They would never ever start at the data stuff, because data is difficult, right? You can't just wipe your stuff and start over again because you have state in your data. The roadmap was long and we were not in the beginning. They would also create a one-size-fits-all, that's what they thought, for this SQL database, but it didn't adhere to the security policies that our department had because we were on a stricter level. So one size did not fit all, and you can sense the special coming up already. So that didn't work for us very well. Also, we ran into things like, if you have one subscription, you can have 200 storage accounts per subscription. So per region, also per subscription per region. So it didn't take long before we got an email saying, listen, if you are on Dev and you want to create a storage account, please do so in Dublin, North Europe, because we ran out in West Europe, all that kind of stuff. And also, it had a shared log analytics, and when we love log analytics with the Custo language and everything, nice. But we couldn't use it because sensitive data. We didn't want our data, or the information about our data, to end up in the shared log analytics, because everybody else could look at it as well. Not the data itself, but the structure and what we were, even the queries that we would be running would be visible in the log analytics, and we don't want other people to see what kind of queries we're running on this data, because there might be names in the where clause and such. So too sensitive for that. So that didn't work. Fortunately, phase 2. Slightly different. Not a whole lot of difference, but they went at some point, they said, you know what? We need to keep the ad resource group and AD user and whatnot. We need to keep control over this, because we can't just let you run in your pipelines at that level. But we'll let you write your own stuff in your pipeline to deploy your own things. You will just have to make sure you get sign-off from your architects and your security people for what you did, right? So you can use our stuff, that's cool. If you don't, pretty cool, but you need sign-off. That was the trade-off that they made. Also, they wrote, instead of they created these templates, they wrote ARM templates that you could use, that were also approved, and you could build upon. So you could take their standard, add a little bit, and get it more easy approved, right? That was good for us. But they wrote ARM, they switched to ARM, and ARM at that time, we're talking a year and a half, maybe 2 ago, where it's, right now it's September 2020, so it'll be October when you see this, I think. Or later on the rebrand. But right now it's halfway through September 2020. So 2 years ago ARM was cool, but the development tools were a bit, it was hard. Maybe that's just me, but I didn't like it. I really didn't like ARM. It was complicated. I didn't want to invest much energy in it. It was taking up too much time. I'm not an infrastructure guy, I'm a data engineer, right? So they actually had the same experience, the CCC people. They also thought, okay, this is slowing us down. And they thought it would be going faster when they would stop writing their own marketplace components and start writing ARM templates. But there came so many requests from everybody that it just, and they had to learn this ARM as well. It became a problem. So what they did was phase 3. We're getting there, and the phases are going faster from now on. This was easy, right? Out comes the CLI. You can do AZ SQL Server create, boom, 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 done. One line of code. I love one-liners. Actually, this is the thing, the monitor I'm looking at now is a 49-inch ultra-wide, so one-liners are really easy for me to make. But this was nice, but this one was even nicer. New AZ SQL Server, Powershell, yes. Loved it. That was the only problem was they dropped ARM completely and went completely with the CLI and the PowerShell equivalent of that. And also they ran it on different OSs, so the CLI would run on the Linux node and PowerShell would run on the Windows node. These days you can do it both ways, but problem though, you need to use Bash in one case and PowerShell in the other. And which one do you use? You want to think about this answer for a second? Here we go. It's both. Unfortunately, there is something called idempotency. So something is you need to make sure whatever you write for Azure is idempotent. ARM templates are or are supposed to be that. And it just means that if you run something and you run it again and you don't change anything, nothing changes and it won't give you an error message. And if you change a little thing and it's a thing that can change, so not the name of the object or something, it will change just that one thing for you and not delete it and recreate it or something, which would be bad for a database, right? So idempotency is important. ARM has it, but these days also the CLI and the PowerShell equivalent are supposed to have it. All three are not 100% the case though, and that's why you end up having to use all three of them. Also, the team was divided into people that had different backgrounds. So the networking guys were Linux guys, and the guys that did the databases and the liddies, they were used to Windows. So one of them used Bash and the other one PowerShell, which resulted in scripts that had both of them in there. And to roll out a single Azure Synapse would be 540 lines of code, because there were a bunch of things in there that were not idempotent, so they had to build loops. And the loops in PowerShell were readable for me, but the Bash stuff, I'm just, what? What is that? Maybe there are Linux people looking at this and going, you silly André, Bash is easy and loops are easy in Bash, but not to me they weren't. So, getting there. Phase 4. Oh, finally, phase 4 made it so easy for us because ARM was back and now it becomes really easy to work. This is a YouTube video still from March in 2020, and this is VS Code with the ARM extension, and it becomes a dream to make ARM templates. I love it. I've given it preference now to certainly the CLI, but mostly also the PowerShell thing. I kind of like the combination of PowerShell and ARM now. That works for me. I do everything in ARM until I run into something that I have to do with PowerShell, and then or with the CLI, and then I choose PowerShell. That's my thing. So that was the 4 phases that they went through, and we as a team as well. At some point we had to change the code and talk to the management, and it just took longer than we thought. This the thing in corporate, it just takes so long to build these things. And we thought, oh, we'll just go to the cloud quickly. We'll show those infrastructure guys, on these on-prem people that we can do this really fast. Yeah, not always. There's a big learning curve. If all your ivory towers suddenly disappear with all the processes that are well thought out and have been around for decades, that suddenly disappear. So, having said that, we've moved. We're at, not completely, but we're pushing data across. We're at 60 terabytes or something. That is now running nicely in Synapse. We're preparing other services. Other departments are looking at us from, hey, that works pretty well. Our Synapse is quite a lot faster than the on-prem system, even though we were proud of the on-prem thing. So let me take you through, finally, in the last few minutes, on our top 10 lessons learned that I have. So, there's a few. This is a simple one. Allow Azure services and resources to access this server. Our CCC said, thou shalt not use this, because we don't trust anyone but ourselves. We had to. Polybase does not work if you don't switch this on. You need this for Polybase. You can BCP your stuff in Azure DW, not if you have hundreds of terabytes that you want to pump in there. You need Polybase to work. You need to fight with the CCC people to get this approved. Really simple. Which cloud? The discussions. Remember, Oracle is blah. Oh my. We're back at this again. Which cloud is better? Don't get into that. I'm sure Amazon is a good cloud provider. I have no experiences with it. The Oracle people at the company actually liked it because apparently AWS is a good Oracle thing. We just ran with Azure. We were allowed to run with Azure. They preferred Azure. Yay, all good. No complaints. Worked really well. There are people that would debate on the let's use instead of ARM, let's use things like Terraform, so you have just one code base for everything. Not true. It's the same language, but it's not the same code base. It's not like if I have a piece of code here that runs something in Azure and I run it against AWS, it will just create this equivalent in AWS. That's not how it works at all. So be aware of that. Monies, we were told we were not involved in the monies, but at some point your manager is going to ask. So make sure that you make choices based on some cost that you have in the back of your head. For instance, data factory, how many loops you use, and if you do it thousands of times every 5 minutes, it's going to cost you. So be careful there. Make sure you're aware of this stuff, and that at some point they're going to ask, what is the cost of this thing? Because telling people up front, not going to work. That's just too hard. There's so many different ways of calculating costs. It's not going to work. If you create a services like an Azure SQL DB and you have you're on-prem, you won't be able to open up your management studio and connect through the network that you have on-prem through Azure and then connect to the DB. You have to go through the interwebs to the outside. You have to open up some firewalls. Or use this private endpoint. That's fairly new and there's a cost attached to it, but you have to do something there. Also, your AD on-prem is not the same as your AD in Azure, even if you've synchronized it. There's no way you can do integrated authentication. So you'll have to, your applications will have to change your connection string. Ivory Tower still pop up. Architects, I was lucky. We had an architect that just got it and helped us. We also had old school architects that wanted to go in a meeting with 6 people to discuss the naming conventions of a resource group or something. So make sure you hunt down that architect that knows his Azure stuff and you run things by him to get some improvement from upper level management and whatnot. That might help. That helped us a lot. We had an awesome architect that helped us a lot there. This is one, the CCC or the CCOEs, these guys help you, these guys and girls, help you with infrastructure as code. They probably don't even, sometimes they don't even realize there's stuff going on inside your infrastructure. So if you roll out a data factory, inside data factory is also a publish button, and you can have a pipeline for your data factory. Same goes with your databases or even Databricks, right? You can roll out stuff with a pipeline inside your infrastructure. CCC, no idea about this. You have to do this yourself. And you sometimes have to fight them to make sure that actually you get enough rights to make this work. Remember where it's not clicky, draggy, droppy in production, and that you have no rights at all to do something? This might include your pipeline as well. You have to talk to these guys. So Azure DevOps, it's a bit of a, you have to imagine where your code is running. So if you, for instance, run your code and you connect your SQL database through a pipeline, you connect your SQL database to a VNet, that could mean that your pipeline can't connect to it anymore. So your next step will fail. You have to figure out, if you close something, if you make a closed system, can my pipeline still operate on it? Or do I have to open up my pipeline to this same VNet to do something, right? You have to think about this inception that happens sometimes. Yeah, I used one of these. This is not a picture of mine because I was not allowed to take a picture in the data center, but I've actually rolled one of these into the data center. You don't roll this into the data center yourself. You have to, there's going to be a research on how much weight your data center floor can take, and it has to be approved and all these things. This is a data box heavy that can take a petabyte of data, except for the fact that it doesn't. These are actually two machines, and they can both take about 400 terabytes of data, something like that. So you can't take a petabyte, and you have to split it up on the two machines. Also, they have different ways of connecting to it, and we pushed something to the wrong shares, and we had to push it to another one, and I had to attach a laptop to the thing sitting on top of that machine and have it copy things through the laptop for 2 days to put it into the right location. It was a bit silly for an expensive machine like that. You might be better off doing the smaller data boxes. In hindsight, we should have just pushed it across the network. This would be my tip. Just push it across the network, test it out if you really need one of these data boxes, because they slow down your process. We copied a database backup on this thing, and then had to create a VM in Azure to restore the thing on, and then make a data factory. And the VM was about 50,000 euros a month, and we ran it for 3 months. That was not the right decision. We should have done that differently. The Cloud Competence Center, I've talked about the decisions they made and the switches they made and the learning process, and it sounds like I wasn't happy with them. Totally not true. They were really helpful. They at some point even did like an open source kind of thing where they took feedback, and we could do pull requests on their code, and they would talk to us, and they were really open on improving the documentation and everything. So I loved it. That was really cool. Last but not least, learn ARM and use PowerShell. These are the things that you probably need to know. If you're a data person, Azure Pipelines, ARM, and PowerShell are probably going to be your friends. You can use Bash. You will figure it out when you run into it. Google it, and then you'll figure it out. It's not that hard, but it's really very unreadable, according to me. And I just love PowerShell. That worked for me. This is my trick. That concludes it. So I'm probably still on the Q&A if you're watching this live. If you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you recognize some stuff, or you're going to recognize this in the future, which might help you with guidance through your own project a bit easier, because you recognize the learning curves. Thank you. Goodbye.